Good evening. My name is Jim Gaffney. I'm the Executive Director of the Theta Tau Professional Engineering Fraternity, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second installment of our Theta Tau Thursdays online programming. Tonight, we will be having an interview with past Grand Regent Michael Livingston, and that interview will be facilitated by our Atlantic Regional Director, Justin Klingenberger. To tell you a little bit about Justin before I introduce him so that he can get us started. Justin was initiated in 2012 at the Rho Gamma chapter at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, here in Florida. In 2016, he transferred to Northern Arizona University and helped found the Omicron Epsilon chapter, to which he eventually affiliated. He graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and is now pursuing an MBA at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. He currently serves as the National Archivist and Historian for Theta Tau, as well as one of the Atlantic Regional Directors. So I will bring Justin here out and he can introduce Michael and get things started. Justin, take it away.
Evening, everybody. I'm Justin Klingenberger. Tonight, our guest, Michael D. Livingston, also known as Soup, our former Grand Regent. Soup graduated from the George Washington University Gamma Beta chapter with a BS in computer engineering in 1992. Michael started his career as a radar engineer at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C. He moved to Seattle at the end of 1998 and did QA work for various software companies. For the last 8 years, he has been working at Salesforce, where he is currently Director of Engineering. Michael's national fraternity involvement began just after his graduation when he was named as the Atlantic Regional Director after the 1992 National Convention in St. Louis, Missouri. In 1994, he added Grand Inner Guard to his tasks and served as both the Atlantic Regional Director and Grand Inner Guard until 1996. In 1998, he was elected as Grand Marshal. He was elected as Grand Vice Regent in 2002. Finally, in 2004, he was elected as Grand Regent at the Centennial National Convention in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a position he held for 8 years, longer than anyone else except founder Eric Schrader. During his term as Grand Regent, the fraternity adopted its first ever strategic plan and focused its efforts and energies into creating new colonies and chapters of Theta Tau across the country. Indeed, he presided as Grand Regent for 20 chapter installations and was part of the initiation team for 13 additional installations. He set the example for how we conduct our installations to this day. Michael was instrumental in working to update and modernize our ritual, which had suffered from years of benign neglect. The newer modern version is the one that each chapter now uses. Brother Livingston was inducted into the Alumni Hall of Fame in 2018 for service to the fraternity. Outside the fraternity, Michael is active as well. He has served as a board member for the Seattle Children's Museum and is an active football official with both the Pacific Northwest Football Official Association and the Northwest Intercollegiate Football Official Association for D2 and D3 conferences. He officiated for the 2016 Division II National Championship. He is also on the chain crew on the sidelines for Seattle Seahawks games. Indeed, Mike couldn't attend the National Officer Meeting in 2014 because he was working the sidelines for the NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers. That evening, as several brothers gathered together at a bar to watch the game, the national officers got to see our former Grand Regent on the national television, standing behind the coach for Green Bay. It was an amazing moment. All told, Michael has been serving the fraternity in an official capacity for over 20 years, most recently as a facilitator and advisor. We're glad he is able to join us here tonight. Soup,
Thank
thanks
you,
for
Justin.
being here.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Thanks for that introduction. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're very glad to have you. So I'll just get right into it. How did you first get involved with Theta Tau?
I first got involved back, obviously, when I was in college. At that time, when I first went to George Washington, Gamma Beta chapter was inactive. And then some of my friends that were the same year as me, they started the fraternity back up. This would be around 1989. They started the fraternity back up at Gamma Beta chapter. And then they kind of talked me into rushing and pledging, and I shortly joined in our second pledge class after our refounding back in 1990. I was a pledge.
And what would you say your experience was that may be different from some members who are in established chapters or who joined in a colony that was already established?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of new chapters over the years, recently over the years, and I think this experience would be very similar to what they had in the fact that we were all kind of new to it. We had to figure out how we would go about doing our processes, what types of things worked best for us to accomplish everything we needed to do, setting up events, doing elections, just getting everything off the ground and really going forward is different for us than an established chapter, which kind of has a lot of those things, and maybe you would tweak them, but they already have most things kind of set in stone that they've worked out.
What was one lesson from your membership in Theta that you learned a great deal from, and how did you learn it?
I think one of the big things was just all the friendships that I had. I mean, obviously, there are people that I met in the fraternity at that time, and even after I graduated there, I stayed involved with the chapter. And the people I've met, we still stay in contact. We have a Facebook group, and so during the pandemic, we've had a couple of Zoom calls together to just catch up and stay in touch. And so it's the friendship was really good. And I think the other part was just the leadership opportunities that started in the chapter and then continued on into the national fraternity.
And what drew you to engineering in the first place?
It's a weird question, only because I was very big into science and math. I really enjoyed those. Actually, to be honest, my original plan when I was in high school, I wanted to go into accounting. I really liked math and tables. At the time, I wanted to kind of go get a Navy scholarship. And so when I talked to them, they said, we don't need accountants in the Navy. We need engineers. So if you become an engineer, you'll be much better chances of getting a naval scholarship. And so I chose engineering, and I enjoyed it, and I stuck with it.
Did that desire to do a Navy scholarship influence your first job at the Naval Observatory?
Not specifically, right? So I wanted the scholarship. I ended up not getting the scholarship. I enjoyed engineering, and so I stayed in the curriculum there. Started out as an electrical engineer. I started so long ago they didn't even have computer engineering at that time, and I think about my third or fourth. I took 5 years in college. My third or fourth year, they finally had computer engineering, and so I kind of just switched into that. But as far as Naval Research Laboratory goes, one of my brothers, one of the Theta Tau brothers, he worked there, and he knew that I was looking for kind of an internship, and so he recommended me. I applied for the job and got an internship there, and then after I graduated, I just continued on full time at that location.
Very cool. And what decisions have you made in your career that would have surprised you in college?
Wow. I'm not sure there's really any that would have surprised me in college. Obviously, um, yeah, I don't know if there was really any. I mean, I think, one thing that people, students that are out there now is always be flexible, always be willing to look, at least for me, willing to look for opportunities. Now, I'm not saying always be looking for other opportunities than what you have, but don't just shut off any opportunities that might arise and kind of be set into, where you're at. I've worked for a number of different companies. I've learned things from each one of them, but at the end of the day, right, you always have to be open and understand what your opportunities are, what your value is, and potentially you could kind of go through those.
So, has your career path matched your expectations as a student member?
Uh, I it's funny. I think when I was a student member, I did a video for George Washington University, and I said at one time I would own my own company. So I didn't quite do that, and I think that's fine, or at least I haven't done it yet. You never know in the future. There are always opportunities there. But when I started out as a radar engineer, that was more of a hardware job, and then when I transitioned into software when I got here, and it was kind of one of those things where I transitioned more into software work, and it's worked out well.
So we mentioned in your bio that you did QA work for various software companies. Could you describe more about what QA work is?
Yeah, so for what we did, a lot of it was manual testing. So there's two different types of quality work that can be done in software companies. There's manual testing and then there's automated testing. A lot of what I did was manual testing. And so what that would be is we would have the software, we would get the requirements and the specs. Uh, as testers, we would go about creating sort of our test plan, what tests we wanted to run. We would set up the environments, get everything kind of configured, different user types, different environments, and then we would run through our test plans and then just report bugs. And so we would, and then when the developers would fix the bugs, we would go verify them and, give the final sign off before we would release any software out to the public.
Is there anything that has been really interesting or surprising to you in the development of computers and computer engineering technologies in the last 5 to 10 years?
I think just even over my career, it's the speed of, the rapid speed of development and changing in the growth of the, software world. I mean, if you look at it, social media companies have been around for 15, 20 years. Now you're getting into all the sort of AI and automation that is starting to come about. I think that's a big change that's coming into the world where there's Internet of Things. It's a big thing that we talk about in Salesforce is the Internet of Things, where everything's connected and kind of talking to each other. And I think that's just the way the technology it accelerates and advances so quickly over time. It's really amazing to watch.
Is there anything, an emerging technology that you're seeing that's really exciting to you, maybe besides AI or the Internet of Things?
Not so much. I think the AI is going to be very interesting over the next 5 years, 5 to 10 that impacts the rest of our life, and the way it's able to do things. I think and how it all goes into the gig economy, and then now with a lot of people with the pandemic and working from home, you're seeing how different services are now being useful, more important and practical to people's lives. I think I think you'll see some new ones come out of this that makes life a little bit better for people in a current, in a changing environment that we have now.
And um, just to kind of bring it back to Theta, how would you say Theta has helped your career?
To me, the biggest thing is leadership. It's the opportunities that it provided for leadership in the chapter at first, and then when when I became a national officer, the leadership opportunities there, the things I learned, the things I worked or learned with working with other people. The leadership has been tremendous, and it's carried over to now where I've gone into management in my career side. It's definitely something that uh, I could see was really practical and helpful in my career to being able to manage people and so forth. So it's the leadership opportunities that were presented were just amazing for me.
And what advice would you give to young engineers in college or maybe recently graduated?
Uh, I would say, a couple things. Try and learn as much as you can. Always be learning. So even when you graduate, right, you're learning things in school, but when you graduate, like I said, the technology accelerates and changes so fast for engineering. Always learn new things. Always be growing. Always try and get better at what you're doing. Um, learn the new technologies. Learn new ways of doing things. Just try and make yourself kind of better as in your career and your life and any, whatever advocation you're doing, always try and grow and get better.
And when you were Grand Regent, the fraternity undertook a lot of brand new initiatives. When the fraternity launched its first strategic plan, what were some outcomes you were hoping for from its implementation?
I think, some of the big things there was to actually have a plan in place. I think prior to that, we did a lot of work, and during my time, a lot of thanks go out. The Grand Regent and the executive director in the central office really did a lot of the legwork for the fraternity at that time. Um, Bob Pope, Mike Abraham in the central office, Glenn Wilcox, Lee Haas, Dean Bettinger, the Grand Regents right before me. They did a lot of work, and what I really wanted to do with the strategic plan was to have a specific plan, a big specific strategic plan that all of the national officers and executive council bought into, that we all helped create, that we all could then participate in accomplishing, right? Because we helped create those goals, we helped set up what that plan was, and I wanted all of, like, the entire executive council and national officers to kind of participate in that, because if we have more people working on towards a goal, we can accomplish a lot more quicker. And I think, the results are out there, right? I think you see the growth of the fraternity and a lot of things that we were able to accomplish because we had the strategic plan that we were then, as engineers, we're very objective, we're very methodical. And so if you had a plan and you can just start executing on a plan and creating action items, it created a lot easier for us to relate and all buy in and contribute to.
One of the other things that happened in your tenure as Grand Regent was some pretty impressive expansion. Would you say the strategic plan was a big contributing factor in that, or what were some other really strong influences to that growth?
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things. I think the strategic plan helped us focus on that. I think when we initially did the strategic plan in 2005, our goal was 100 chapters, and we did a 10-year plan, right? So it was 10 years to 2015, and we wanted 100 chapters by then. We didn't quite meet that goal, but that's fine. We got us in the right direction. I think another thing was, this is a great fraternity, in my opinion, and it provides opportunities for engineers with social interaction, professional interaction. It's just a great fraternity. So the story we had was really good, and the experiences that we could share with prospective members, I think, really resonated with everybody. And then lastly, the central office and Mike Abraham really had a great job as far as when we would get those initial, um, the initial inquiries. We had a good plan and a good story where, we could kind of just execute on it. And it wasn't like we knew what we were going to say. We knew what the pitch was. We knew the material that we needed from them. We give them a clear document on here's the steps you need to follow. And so it was really well laid out. And we just follow that plan every single time, and it was really, really successful. And um, it helped with Google, right? When people did searches, Theta, they looked for professional engineering fraternity. We were one of the first ones that came up. Um, but when they would call a couple of the top ones, I think we had a good story, and rightfully so, right? I think this is, obviously a great fraternity.
Uh, Another really standout thing that happened during your tenure was the Educational Foundation. Could you describe some of the early days of that and the driving goals of its development?
Sure, and a lot of that started it was while I was on the council, but before I was Grand Regent. So, that I think a lot had to do with Lee Haas and Michael Abraham too, and I think Bob Pope was involved with that too. But really, we wanted at that time we had gotten to a point in the fraternity's life where we needed a foundation, and we wanted to set one up that could then provide educational tools for our student members. And so it was time to do it. And we had, it was something that was really important to us, and we prioritized it. And a lot of people got that done. So yeah, it was a great. Janice Wiedela was another one that was very heavily involved with that, and it was really, really good work by a lot of people.
Now, for those who don't know, in your free time, you're a football official. Could you describe what a football official does?
Yeah, it's usually like if you ever go to a football game, it's usually the person you yell at because you don't like the calls that they make. But I mean, generally, what we do is we go to games. We start, you start out. You're on the Pee Wees on Saturday. The Saturday morning games out at the park. You're doing Pee Wee games. Eventually, you get up to JV games and high school varsity games, and but we're the arbiters of the game, and so a lot of that is just studying the rules, knowing the rules, and going out on the field and ensuring that the contest is fair and that the best team wins every game that we do.
So, did you get involved with that through your family, or was it a passion for football?
It's a passion for sports, and as I got older, it was sort of I needed something competitive, somewhat competitive, to kind of force the exercise. I saw an ad in the newspaper. I went out. Um, I went out. I tried it, and that first year I was hooked. It is somewhat like a fraternity. You have a group of people there that have a common interest, a common goal. Um, we go on the field. Usually, nobody like we always say if we've done a good game when both teams don't like us, right? And so the only people you have there are your fellow officials, and so it builds some camaraderie there. And so I've made some great friends in the officiating organization. I happen to be, um, I was pretty good at it, and it was just great being out on a Friday night, and then later in my career on Saturday afternoons, just at a football game and participating and helping those go on. So it's been great, but it's somewhat like a fraternity with you have a small group of people that especially at the college level, because there you have to apply. For high school, if anyone's interested in officiating any kind of sports, by all means, find out your local association, ask them. We need sports officials for every kind of sport. But at the college level, you kind of have to apply, you get accepted. And there it becomes much more of a fraternity. Like, it's a smaller group of people. I think my college group has about 70 or 80 people in it. And so, those are the people that you're going to go to work with on every Saturday. So it's a great experience.
So it looks like we've got some questions from people watching. I think the first one that people really want to know is why soup? And I think it's on the bottom of the screen now, if people can see it.
Yeah, it's kind of really a boring story, but my right after I got initiated that first summer of 1990, the national convention was in Iowa, and me and three other members of my chapter, we drove out to the convention. We attended the convention, and then on the drive back, so we had two cars because we were with a couple other people from another chapter. We met up with them. On the drive back, I drove one car, and the other car kept switching drivers, and I just kind of drove for I don't know, 12, 13 hours straight. And so the next morning they dubbed me super driver, and that's too big to fit on the back of a t-shirt. So it just cut the soup. So it's not a great story.
I mean,
Not interesting, but
I've heard much worse fraternity stories, so
yeah,
I'd say that's a pretty good one. I think we
yeah.
got another one.
There's more to that story, but I'll leave that out about anyway.
I think we got a question from Dan White. Oh no, I'm sorry. From Amara Min. Uh, One defining aspect of your tenure was fraternity growth. Why did you feel it was important to focus on this?
I think a big thing for us was, first and foremost, we wanted to bring the Theta Tau experience to more people. We wanted to bring it to more campuses, more students. We wanted more people to experience that. But the other part was also the more chapters we had, the more students we had, the more resources we had, and volunteers we had that could then help us kind of accelerate that growth, if you will, right? So as it kind of would build on each other. So if we had more chapters, we could have closer chapters together. They could do more things together and enhance that experience. We'd have more volunteers, right? It increased the resources that we would have as a fraternity that would enable us to then implement more things along the strategic plan that we had. So yeah, I think that was, a big thing.
Yeah, having been at the 100th chapter installation out in California 2 summers ago or last summer, it really has been an incredible amount of growth in a short time. I think we have a question from Dan White coming up next. How did you decide to run for the executive council initially, and what motivated you to run eventually for Grand Region?
Yeah, I think so. I started out as Atlantic Regional Director in '92. It wasn't a position I was like. I went to '92 convention in St. Louis, and I was an alumnus at that point. I was just some people I had met in previous national conventions. We were there. We had all just graduated. It was, I wouldn't say a last hurrah, but we were all enjoying our friendship. And then Dean Bettinger kind of pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I see you're very active. Would you be interested in being Atlantic Regional Director?" And I said, I didn't really think about it, but yeah, I would love to do that. And so then I got involved with the national fraternity. 2 years later, at the next election, I decided to run. I was fortunate to get elected a Grand Inner Guard at that time. And then, once once the bug hit, it's like I just wanted to keep doing more. And it was one of those things. The more work I put into it, the more I got out of it. And so then I would put more work into it, and it was kind of a cycle that just kept propelling me up until eventually I saw the opportunity to. I just kept moving up until it was. I want to lead this organization. I want to bring it to a new set of heights, if you will.
Yeah, and obviously you were very successful in that. I think we have a question from Jamie Van, our current Grand Region. With your extensive volunteering with Theta Tau and now continuing that trend outside of the fraternity, what advice do you have to stay interested in those activities?
I think it's, like I said, it's one of those things as when I participate in it, I get value back, or I feel I get value back. And so I want to kind of do more. And so that's where, the organization, whatever it might be. So for me, it was Theta Tau for a long time, and now it's football officiating and, whatever else I might be involved in. I want to get something back, and then I want to make that organization that I'm part of better for the next people. And I want more people to experience the joy, happiness, the success maybe that I've felt. I want other people to feel that, because it's just a good feeling, and I want to do that with others. So it's just one of those things where if you're involved with it and you are getting something out of it, contribute to the organization, so that it can help others in the future, right, that follow you.
Absolutely. It looks like we have a question via email. Looking back at your administration, what is something you wish you'd done or changed or built?
I don't think, I don't really regret anything, or wish that I had done differently. I think we had a lot of success. I mean, obviously we could have probably done some things differently, but um, we had a great group of people that worked in as national officers. We had, the central office and Mike Abraham. It was really a well-working team that worked together, and we accomplished things. We didn't meet all of our goals, but I guess maybe, I wish we would have met all of them a little bit quicker. But it was such great experiences. And, even now when I look back, like I see some photos from 10 years ago and look at the executive council, and I mean, I still talk to a lot of those people, because I mean, they are, they helped contribute. It was a group, effort. And everyone contributed to it and helped out. And it was just great teamwork that helped us accomplish what we wanted to do.
So now we have a question from Frank Ventura, and It's up on screen. What's the next chapter in your life look like?
uh, right now, I think this chapter, I'm still in the middle of it. Just continue. I'm too young to retire, unfortunately. And so I can't quite get to that chapter yet, but for me now, it's trying to get better at my officiating career, trying to get better at my engineering career, going through those things. I guess the new chapter now is um, trying to travel more and experiencing more things in life. I've started to do that over the last 3 years. I've taken a lot more trips and seeing different places in the world while I'm still young enough to be able to do it, but not and so I can enjoy them. So I'm starting to do that, but there's not lot of big changes in the chapter until retirement time.
Um, Kind of following up on that, how have you found the ability to balance your engineering career versus your officiating career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Officiating takes a lot of time. Fortunately for me, like games are either at night or on the weekends, and so that generally makes it pretty easy. Like in the off season, like right now, there's a lot of meetings around studying and preparing for the season, both mentally and physically. Once we get into the season, it takes a lot more time, and you just have to be, I got to be very disciplined on my time. A lot of it is on the weekends, like Friday morning, I would get up, I would go to my office, and then go straight from the office to my high school game, leave my high school game and start driving to my college game, do my college game on Saturday, and then probably Saturday night get back home. And so you kind of have to, when you're at work, this is, something I've heard from one of the officiating friend that I know, a mentor. When you're at work, be focused on work, right? Like do work. When you're officiating, do officiating. Like be focused on that. When you're with family and you're with friends, be focused on family and friends. You can't be kind of mixing and combining everything. You got to be fully 100% in on whatever you're doing at that time, and set up the time for that. And when that time's done, you're done with that. Move on to the next thing. But when you're involved, be 100% in on whatever it is you're focused on right there, and try not to, multitask in the moment, if you will. Right. So when I'm on the field, it's football. Or when I arrive at the stadium, it's football. Works out. Like when I'm at work, I'm working.
Time management is something that is both really important in fraternity life and as an engineering student. Would you say your engineering curriculum and your time as a member helped with time management later on in your career and life?
Yeah, I think that would be fair to say. You kind of learn some of the time management stuff when you're in college, between your curriculum and being part of the fraternity, being part of other organizations, working. You learn those skills there, yeah, and those definitely did apply later in life. Absolutely.
So it looks like we have a question from, I apologize if I get this name incorrect, Rob Riali. Unfortunately, it's a little too long to put up on the screen, so I'm just going to read it. Now that we are in our 50s, do you see a lot of differences in the activities now versus the 90s?
Rob, it's great. Thanks for the question. It's been a long time. Yeah, Rob, we go way back. I remember being. I think the installation at Upsilon Beta was the first one I ever attended. So, yeah, that's great memories. So that's great coming from Rob. I I'm not as active, with the fraternity and with the active student members as much now to really tell a difference. Um, I think uh, obviously things have changed between the 90s and now, and in what what some of the activities are and what activities are sort of approved and allowed. I think are different, but I'm not as involved with the student members nowadays to really know about the students themselves. But yeah, great to hear from you, Rob.
It looks like we got another question from Dan White here. Uh, some national officers from old pictures have since become Grand Regent, and some have drifted away from Theta Tau. How can we make volunteering more attractive to mid career professionals?
Yeah, and I think that's something we always struggled with in the strategic plan. One of the stakeholders we talked about were corporations, and how do we get involved with corporations? How do we get involved with those, mid-career alumni and bring them back in? I think, we always struggle to do that. The things that I see is, like, at least for me, right? I always stayed involved with Data Toss. I always had that time that was set aside for it. But I think a lot of alumni, when you graduate, you're going to fill your time with things, whatever it may be, whatever organization, it might be family, it might be work. You're going to fill your time up, and at that point, it's hard to bring new things in, right? And so if Theta Tau hasn't been part of your life for a number of years, I think it's going to be hard to really re-engage them and bring them back in. I think the big thing that we always talked about was trying to get them from, right when they graduate, to keep them involved in some capacity, so they have some slice of their life that's, um, would be, to kind of have that time set aside for Theta Tau that they can carry on throughout life, right?
So, is there anything that you think young members of the fraternity should know or think about in terms of getting involved as an alumni?
Yeah, there's a lot of different avenues that you can get involved as alumni. Obviously, first and foremost, well, I don't want to say first and foremost. There's a lot of different ways, and it depends on what you want to do. You can stay involved with your chapter. You can be an advisor. You could be a mentor to the chapter members there. If you want to get involved with your house, with your chapter, with a house, there's house corporations that you can probably get involved with. And maybe some of this stuff has changed over the years, but at least at that time, right? So you could be a mentor to the students, or you can involve on the house corporation side, where you're helping. It doesn't require as much time, maybe attending meetings and so forth, but you're helping the chapter build a house or get a house. The other one would be, I know now we have a lot of like social activities. We've had ski trips, we've had cruises. So if you want to stay involved socially, just with other brothers, there's the National Alumni Association that you can stay involved with and do the social activities there. And of course, there's a national fraternity that you can go volunteer. I know they are always looking for volunteers with a lot of the projects, with the strategic plans that they have. That they're looking for volunteers that you can go and help out on, and that can be tailored to whatever time frame and time availability that you have in your schedule. So there's a lot of different avenues that you can do. There's also local alumni clubs that you can set up, just to meet and hang out with and socialize with alumni in the area. So there's a lot of different avenues depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I can say personally, I've loved getting involved as an alumni. Some of my best memories already have been from the alumni setting. It looks like we have a question from David Parker via email. Where do you see Theta in 5 years?
Wow, I think David's probably a better one to answer that than I am, since he's on the EC. But I just hope that we can continue to the trajectory that we're on, bringing it to more engineering campuses, bringing the experience to more students. I think it would be great to, again, this is hard, to how to reach out to corporations and those mid-career alumni. I don't know exactly what the answer is to that, but hopefully there's some way that we can get some mid-career alumni back together and keep the alumni involved as we go forward. But I just hope that things just continue, on a trajectory where we're bringing it to more people and able to accomplish more of the goals that we set forth.
Definitely. Hindsight is always 2020. Um, do you think that you would have done more as a student member, or do you think that your involvement as an alumni was really the highlight of your time with Theta?
Um, I mean, I think my time as an alum would be the highlight, not necessarily to take away as a student member part. I was a student member for 2 years, so whereas I was a national officer for almost 25 years, there's just a lot more experiences that I had as an alum But I still talk to some of my brothers from Gamma Beta. I have a lot of great memories with the time there and the things that we did. Great stories, great memories. But I have a lot with as an alum too. It's just, it definitely was one of the, I say this a lot. I've said this in my speeches. It's one of the best choices I've ever made in my life, and that is by far, something I'm so glad I did at the time. It's all because of the friends and the experiences that I've had in my life that are, I wouldn't trade them in for anything.
And in your experience, what is one thing that student members can do to attract new recruits, bring more people in for Rush, help spread Theta Tau to people who may not know about it?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we always talked about was, sort of living your values, having, your chapter of what it means to be a Theta Tau brother, and what it means to be a Theta Tau chapter, to really live those values and show those. Like, if you bring someone in and you're trying to explain to them why they should join, and prospective members will see a difference between talk and action. And so your talk needs to align with what your action is and what you're doing. And I think the experiences that we provide, our student members, that are there, I think the student members should talk about their experiences, and it will just recruit members, in my opinion, right? I think, as I said before, it's a great fraternity. Best thing I've ever done in my life. And I think if you bring in prospective members and you just show them that, they'll want to join.
100%. So my last question for you is, what is your fondest Theta Tau memory?
Uh, I, man, I don't, I have so many. I remember, I remember my initiation. I remember I got initiated in April and we didn't have a chapter meeting after that. And then I went to the Iowa convention. Um, my first official Theta Tau meeting was the opening ceremony of the national convention. And if any of you have been to a national convention or a national meeting, and I highly recommend you attend one, because it really gives you, it shows you how this is a national fraternity. But my first meeting was there, and just I remember the opening ceremony, and with the Grand Regents and the Executive Council, people I had just read about, meeting them, I think was a great experience. Obviously, getting elected Grand Regent, was I remember that. Um, yeah, just all the accomplishments we did, and obviously the friendships, because that's what carries on. We had successes, we had things and moments in time, but the friendships carry on. To this day, I have so many of my friends are Theta Taus, and it's just, that they're gonna create new memories, having those friends. So I think that's probably the big thing.
Well, thank you so much for all the insights you've been able to share with us. We absolutely appreciate you giving your time. It looks like we have one last question from our public chat, from Frank Ventura. What does a director of engineering do on a day-to-day basis? And can you touch on what led from SW to director of engineering?
Yeah, so at Salesforce we have a software engineering team. So I first started there. I was basically I was a quality engineering manager. Eventually, we kind of combined, and I became just an engineering manager. So I managed, teams that built software, and then it went to senior manager, and then it becomes a director. So in my role, I'm sort of a second line manager. So I have managers that report to me, and then they manage teams. So I kind of, again, and these are things I learned in Theta Tau when I was on the executive council, right? We create a plan. We make sure that we execute the plan. I have people there that are helping me execute the plan. They give feedback, they give input, and they help make us a successful team. And those were things I learned in Theta Tau and the executive council.
Well, it really sounds like your time in Theta Tau influenced your career greatly. So, uh, your ability to share that with us has just been really special. I think I'm going to throw it back to Jim. And once again, Soup, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. It's been a pleasure. I'm always happy to talk Theta Tau.
All right. Well, thank you both for your unique insight, I think, into Theta Tau. Thank you all of those who watched. The next Theta Tau Thursday event will be Thursday, July 2nd, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, a great way to kick off your Independence Day weekend. And that will be a program, the first of a two-part program on how to build and invest in your professional network. So with that, I thank you all. I hope that you have a good night, a good weekend, and we will see you in a few weeks.